Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Schweiger, and in today's tutorial I'll show you the best practices for creating a brand style guide using a fictitious restaurant called Divine Possibilities. I'll demonstrate both using Illustrator and InDesign, and I will show you how to generate the information regarding the logo, how to find the information on a 4-color build in CMYK. Then I will move on to creating the black and white version of the logo and playing around with it in InDesign, such as creating and developing a secondary logo, deciding on a favicon, updating the incorrect usage using layers, and sizing the logo to 1 inch to make sure that it will work on many touch points. I'll finalize this presentation by creating a logo palette and updating the primary typefaces. Let's get started. First of all, I want you to know that you should definitely be labeling and saving your vector files. In this case, I'm calling mine Divine Possibilities, and in a second we'll look at these additional files that I've created. The reason why you're going to want to create these additional files to place into your InDesign file is that we've got certain sections that we have to place in there. And so the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is save it, okay? Make sure your file is saved to CMYK, and make sure your file and all your colors are set to a 4-color build. That means that there are whole numbers here, right? And that there's no percentage of a percent. And this includes any kind of illustration that you might have added. So in this case, I've got the bow tie pasta. So each piece of it, the lighter color, right, is a 4-color build. The darker part, let me choose the darker part. There's the darker part, okay? Each piece of that is fit to a 4-color build as well. And in this case, you can see that this darker part of the pasta is actually the same color as my typeface, and that's intentional, right? So now that I have the Illustrator file and it's ready and it's saved, I may also want to create a black and white version of the exact same logo. And we can keep it in the 4-color file, but this time, in this case, I have its grayscale. So what you're going to want to do is duplicate what you have here, okay, and change the color to either grayscale or black and white. And the easiest thing to do is to make sure in your color palette, okay, so color palette, just in case you were wondering, the color palette is located here under Window and go to Color, okay? Right off the bat, if I were to, and I'm going to show you this real quick, let me zoom out of the colored one, but if I were to duplicate it, which I did there, copied, pasted it, okay, brought it over here, you can set it side by side, make sure there's enough space in between the two colors, or in between the two logos, right, so that when you go to place it into your InDesign file, you don't have them stacking on top of each other. Okay, so this is the 4-color build, right? I'm going to come in here and it's the 4-color build. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to turn it to grayscale, which I already had done. And when I did that, you notice it's not as dark, right? And so I can adjust that because I want it to kind of have the same feel as the colored version as the black and white version. So I'm kind of running this a little bit backwards. Usually you develop the black and white first, but in this case you're developing both of them at the exact same time. So I'm just showing you, making sure that you have both files. And so I think I ended up with a 75% black on this one. So I'm going to go ahead. Now that's quite different from taking, say, 100% black and then making the opacity at 75%. I'm not doing that. I am still making it, so 75 is right there. You can see it's actually a different color for whatever reason. I don't want that. In this case, I'm making it 75% black here, okay? So you can see I've done that. And then with this here as well, so this is a 4-color build, I'm going to change it to grayscale. Okay, and what did I end up with? You can see here 18%. You can see just by changing it doesn't automatically transform it, right? You may have to adjust it, right? Just like I'm doing here. So I'm going to do that with each piece of my colored logo because when I go to place it in my InDesign file, I need to not only place my initial logo, my 4-color build logo, but also I need to decide on whether my brand needs a secondary logo and replace that secondary logo with that variation. Let's jump in here real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and place that artwork in. And so you can see in this case, I have actually removed the pieces I'm going to place in here. And the reason why I did that was that I want to show you that we're not just copying and pasting it out of InDesign, or sorry, out of Illustrator. We are actually placing it. So get in the habit of doing Command D. So Command D, if I do Command D, it will open up this palette. If you forget how to do Command D, you can also place it. That's what Command D is. Place it in. And so what I want to do next is I'm going to come in here and grab my my logo, my colored logo. So in your case, you need to know where that colored logo is. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to my links palette because that is where, and so I have a couple of AI files here. So this is the first one. And if you remember, I have a 4-color build here, and then I have a black and white version of the logo. So I'm only going to place this one in. If I just choose open and I click once, both of those files are going to come in. That's fine. I can actually come in here now and select my element and shorten it so that I don't see, right, my black and white. I'm going to put my black and white in my secondary area here. And one of the things, the next thing I'm going to do is, now that I've placed that logo in here, I'm going to turn on my guides. And this is helpful. If you notice, this is the first time maybe you're seeing these guides. Maybe you saw them last week. I did mention them in the live training. And the reason for these guides is this is going to give me an idea of like keeping elements in line with one another. So if I want my logo to be a certain size, first of all, I want to maybe shorten up the placement. So I may come in here and just kind of just make it tighter. And the reason why I want to do this is that I'm actually going to size this logo up. And the cool thing about placing Illustrator files, not Photoshop files, but Illustrator files, is that if I wanted to size this up, maybe I want my logo to be as big as my copy down below. What I'll do is I'll just kind of line it up with that copy there. And then I'm going to hold down my Shift and Command key, and I'm going to pull, and that's going to size everything nice and proportionately. So I'm going to demonstrate my new logo here. You can see that the copy, remember, a brand style guide is, it's kind of like a rule book, right? And so this is kind of giving direction to people that do not know your brand very well. So here you can see the typeface should always accompany the Farfalla, I don't know if I'm saying that right, maybe it's Farfalli inspired bow tie pasta illustration. Okay, and that's this. And so I'm giving in direction in the primary logo that both of these elements should be showing up in the primary logo. So in this particular brand, I decided that the logo looks best as is on these colored backgrounds. Okay, so I added this comment here: primary logo is tended to be used on a variety of colored backgrounds. However, one of the things that I thought about, because this logo is very yellow, if I ever needed to use it on a yellow background, what if it was a food image, or maybe it was marketing materials? I mean, after all, this does have yellow, so one of the primary colors I'm going to add to my color palette is going to be the yellow. I thought to myself, how should that logo look if, you know, I ever needed it to be placed on a yellow background? Because yellow on yellow never works, right? So that kind of took me to an idea for a secondary logo. And if you notice here, I've got a new file open, and what did I do? I took the original logo. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just show you what I did. Was I basically took the original logo here and I just dragged it over onto the yellow back, or the yellow artwork, just to see, because this is where you're testing things out. And you can see, oh, that's awful, can't see it, looks terrible, right? So my thought is a secondary logo, maybe white, all white. So anytime the logo needs to be on a yellow background, which yellow is part of the color palette, makes sense. I need to make sure that I have a white version. So that's when I created a new file in Illustrator and I made my logo white. And if you can see the drop shadow of the bow tie, this is that artwork down here. I'm going to ungroup it for a second because it's grouped. This artwork here, okay, stayed the darker because I still want that drop shadow look. But you can see how I used white here and I used white here. So again, you may need to create additional Illustrator files, and it's just copy paste, testing things out. That's all I'm doing here, okay? I may need to update, right, the secondary logos. I want to show you as you're working on your project, you want to make sure as you go through here that you're spell checking your content as well. So not only are you placing your logo in here, but you're going to want to update this content, right, as it makes sense to you, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and again, Command D or go to File, Place, and we're going to put in the secondary logo, okay? And this time I'm just going to click once because I put the logos right next to each other on the file, okay? So now I can just place it in there just as is, okay? And I probably want to align this now with, one thing though I might want to do is just bring this over to about here. There we go. Because you can see that the actual text or the object frame is a little bit wider than the actual artwork. So what I'm going to do now is now that I've shrunk that, you can see I did that, I'm going to go ahead and come through here, right? And I'm going to use my alignment tool. So object layout align gives me my object. And so I want to make sure that I'm going to align it this time to the selection, meaning these two are selected and it's going to align it, right? Again, I'm using my guides to also align it. I can tell it to align horizontal center. And then now my artwork is aligned with the copy below, okay? So as you are working on this project and updating this project, right, with your new information, your logos, your everything, okay, you will want to massage and make sure everything's lined up. Just as I place this content in, I'm going to update my copy here. If you notice over here to the right, the reason why the secondary icon was created was that if you read down here, it says when a smaller logo is needed for social media, i.e. profile picture as small as 36 by 36 pixels, and readability of the logo is negatively affected, use the first letter of the Design Possibilities script logo. This icon can also be used as a favicon, and favicons are the icons that you see when you go to a website. So for instance, if you go to a website like Coca-Cola, for instance, a favicon is this illustrated artwork that goes right here. So that's what I'm talking about. It's very small size that you still have to represent the brand, and those little elements can actually be uploaded by a programmer or web developer. And so you want to think about like see, here's the Coca-Cola logo, right? And I'm just going to accept all the cookies. So here's the logo on the website. But then you can see this is what they decide. Instead of using the script because you can't read it, they use the kind of the hourglass bottle as its icon. So that's what I'm talking about when it comes to things like that. And so you can see how I decided on what needed to be added. And so here you can see the small square image that displays next to the page title in a browser tab. And so you can see it's demonstrated here. And other places across the web, adding custom favicon makes your site recognizable in a browser full of tabs of bookmarks. So I may need to use the D for certain situations. In other situations, I may need to be able to just place the entire logo. So, you know, after looking at this, you're more than welcome to take this and open this up. This happens to be, I believe, a vector file. You can replace it. You can use it in your final project if you want. But I want you to show me how you're going to handle your smaller icon needs. Okay, so you can see here's the primary logo and here is the use of the secondary logos. And if you notice, this one is singular, And this one says secondary logo. So that means you have not only the reversed out and the black and white version of the logo, but also you have the icons that you may need for things like social media or anything small. Maybe imagine an app for a second, right? What is your restaurant app's little icon going to look like? That's what I want you to envision here. Edit with, and then you want to choose Illustrator, not Photoshop. And what that will do is open up all your artwork in here. And if you notice in this one here, right, what I did was I got the dimensions of the circle used for social media. And I'm also doing something else in the circle, which we're about to get to in just a second. And that is, if you look down here, the clear spacing. So clear spacing is really important, and this is something you'll want to edit on your own. And in this case, what I chose was the letter A. So the spacing that the letter A takes up is the spacing that I want to create for clear spacing. In other words, I don't want any elements, any design elements, to invade, so to speak, this logo at least an A height away tall and an A weight away wide. So what I did in here is I also placed the same A, and I shrunk my logo down so that there's clear spacing to show, so that when I place this logo into like social media, there's plenty of clear space. And so here is the smaller version, and here is the larger version, and then here you can come in and replace these elements as well. These are for your icon, the favicon that I talked about here, and then here is also for a smaller version that will show up maybe in social media. And you can see here is a reversed out version and the original version, and the dotted lines suggest the spacing around it. You can see it's slightly different, right, from this one. But this is why we're creating the rule book. We're trying to show how our logo is going to work. And so how did I make that? Well, I made the decision, like how much space is enough space so that I don't have any other elements kind of invading. That doesn't mean that I won't have background elements, like I could still have a color bar behind it, right? Like in the example up here. I'm talking about illustrations, I'm talking about copy, word copy, stuff like that, that I want to have around it. And so all I did was I placed my logo in here, and then I made the decision. And this is the part that you have to do on your own. What spacing should I use to determine that? So I wanted something that kind of looked like a square. And so I looked at the copy here in the logo, and I felt like the A felt like a square to me. So all I did was I took my logo, and if you notice, if I hold down, you can see the rest of the logos in here, right? So all I did was I sized the logo to the A, and then I created these lines. So all this is a stroke. So all I did was I created a line, okay, and then I colorized the line with some dots, basically. So if I go into stroke, okay, I told it I want the type to be dotted, and I also want to add color to it, because right now there's no color, thus you can't see it. So I went in and added, and I went to the color palette, and I went to swatches, which I guess I have open. Let me see here. Sometimes it doesn't show up on my screen because it's hidden somewhere, so I closed it and I'm going to reopen it. And it's somewhere, it might be on my second screen, so let me pull it over here. And sure enough, it is. So, I think I started with black dots first, and then I changed it to the gray color. And you can see I did like a 30% tint of black, okay, to kind of give me my outline, right? And then I did a little bit of measuring to kind of just show like how much space I need to create between the top of the bow tie pasta and the rest of it. And you can kind of see how I handled that. And so it's really easy. It's you deciding, but you still need to demonstrate. There's going to be some things that you've got to decide on your own, and there are going to be some elements where you want to demonstrate. And so I'm showing you, all I did was, like I said, I just took a line and I lined everything. You can see how I've lined up all the dots, right? So that it's equal spacing, and then over here as well, right? And so now when I hand over this product, this brand guidelines to someone, they're going to know that they can do kind of a measuring just by using the simple A as the measuring of the guidelines for, you know, anything that they're going to be placing the artwork onto. Update the current usage of the logo with at least 4 different examples of using your logo, the incorrect way to use it. So notice incorrect, it doesn't say correct way, it needs to be the incorrect way. So what I recommend doing is going back into your original logo. So let me go back. You can see I've moved it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this file and reopen it because I don't want to save it the way that I've made it thus far. What you want to do is make sure you save, once you built your 4-color logo, save it, okay? And then what you can do is duplicate that particular logo and create a new vector file and call it the don'ts, right? And so these are all the different ways that I don't want the logo to look, okay, for one reason or the other. And so I took the original logo and then I took my, you know, I selected this as a group and I just rotated it. So this is one of the ways I don't want someone to, I don't want them to mess with the layout of the typeface and the icon, right? I don't want them to move it around. I don't want them to put a stroke on it just to make something look better, right? I don't want them to change the coloring, right? Part of it black, part of it yellow, just to make it work, right? So I'll take this file now that I've made at least four ways to not use the logo incorrectly, and I'll jump over to this page right here where it says incorrect usage, okay? And I'm going to place that here. And if you notice, I have a little red line. And what I want to do is I want to put the red line over all the incorrect usage. And the reason why I'm going to do that is that visually, if I'm, you know, showing a logo here and I'm showing logos here and I'm showing, you know, an icon here, I don't want them to get to this page and think that these are okay as well. Instead, by putting the red, it automatically gives people like a quick, if they're looking at it as a quick glance, they know it's not correct. So you're more than welcome to use the same red that I'm using, but what I'm going to do next is I'm going to place, and I could place the entire document of the don'ts, and I called it the don't file, right? It's pretty easy, right, to call it the don't file. I could place it right in here, but I want to also pay attention to, like, I could make the logos a little bigger, so I can just kind of come in here. But one thing you should know is that not only do I have the don'ts, but I also have a description. So for instance, I've got 01 and 02. I need to make 03 and 04 to update every time I have a different don't, right? So the other thing too is my red line, you can see, has been, you know, because of the layer order, I want to make sure that I'm placing the red line on top of and not behind. So another thing that I want to point out to you is in the layers palette, okay? But you can see that this is artwork. So I want to make sure that I put it on the graphical elements layer. So I'm going to drag that to this. I'm going to take this layer here and drag it to the graphic elements. And then you can see here's the line. So I want to roll that underneath the line. So you want to think about order and making sure that, for instance, I'm going to drag this over here and I'm going to put this over here. I could shorten it as well, right? But I'm going to duplicate that a couple more times. And what's nice is once I have them kind of in position, right, with one another, I can, you know, once I have that in position like this, I can take my Option key and my Command key and my Shift key, and I'm just going to drag down. That's going to give me 2 more lines, okay? And I want to make sure that those lines, you can see that they somehow bumped the text. I got to move those down. So you can see the lines in here and the lines in here, right? I want to move that down. So what I want to do first, I'm going to go ahead and just take one at a time because it's just easier. I'm just going to drag that to that layer, okay? And then same here. Same true. When I'm placing this artwork in here, do you just notice here, like, I want to make sure that I'm placing my graphic artwork on the graphic artwork layer, and my text kind of stays on the layer by itself. In addition to that, you also want to demonstrate how the logo should look at 1 inch. So I can tell you right now, if you go back in here, this amount right here is already set to 1 inch. So as long as you bring in your logo, you place your logo, and you size it literally to that 1 inch mark, you can use the same layout that we have here, just replacing out your logo and making sure that it sits to 1 inch and making sure that there's enough space around all the copy. It may mean that you got to move your copy down a bit. It may mean that you need to organize this a little bit better, but this is already at 1 inch. So if you look here and you go to, for instance, the info box, I believe it should tell me, yeah. So the height is already at 1 inch. So already chosen to certain colors for your actual logo. So you can put and pop that information in right away. So what I would do is come in here and select the colors in 82893 and go ahead and create a color swatch in InDesign to create the color palette. So come down here and you can see here, this is the all I did was create color bars. You can be a little bit more creative if you want, but what I would just say, if you don't have a lot of time, I would just say update this to your color scheme. So in this particular logo that I created, it's actually a 2-color logo. It's got a little bit of the lighter yellow and it's got a little bit of the darker yellow. So what I can do is create a new color swatch. So go to swatches and create a new color swatch. Now I've already built mine in here, but for yours, once you know one of the colors, which this is one of the colors, 82893, that's the formula, you can add that information right to the CMYK RGB. And what you'll want to do also is create a swatch. So for instance, I called mine the pasta yellow, but that has the same information that I pulled from Illustrator, 82893. Okay. I did that with the second yellow color too, and that's the top color. I'm calling that the top color, this top color here of the pasta. I just call it top color for my convenience of knowing what I'm talking about. So it's easiest to create your color. And the reason why you want to add your swatches here is that when you start to work on finalizing your project, you may want to, colorize your text a certain color using one of the brand colors or something like that. It's going to be easier to pull that color if you have a swatch already created here. And that's true going forward. If you ever wanted to create any marketing materials going forward, you could always use your brand guidelines because you set up your swatches from the beginning. So this is essentially saving you time working on any future brand touch points. Think of it that way. Okay, so now that I know the CMYK formula, I still need to get the RGB numbers and the hex number. So to do that, what I would do is with the color, with this as a CMYK, what I would do is save a copy or save as, and you can save it to your computer. And I've already done this already for this project, but in your folder, in your week 3 folder, let's just go to my week 3 folder here. Okay, what you can do is call this new file the RGB. So I always do this whenever I create a brand. I always create a CMYK version of the logo, the RGB, and the black and white version for my client. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save and hit OK. And what I can do next is I'm going to change my document color mode now to the RGB. So now when I select this, you can see that my numbers, right, are not correct, but that's okay. We're not using this information. We're using this bit of information. So now it's going to give me my RGB formula as well as my hex number formula. Okay, same with your second color. It's going to give me my RGB formula and it's going to give me my hex color. So that's how I'm going to get that information that thus I'm going to put into here. And I will do that for my grayscale version of the logo and my color version of the logo. And then any secondary color palettes, these are the colors that you're going to use in marketing pieces. And you can see here, here's a menu. And if I zoom in real carefully, this is actually an InDesign file placed in InDesign. Believe it or not, you can do that. And if I open this up, so how do I open this up? If I click on it and I go to my links palette, just like I did with the AI file, do you see how it's an InDesign file? I can right click on it and I can say edit with, and I'm going to use InDesign 2023. So what it's going to do is it's going to open up its own file, right? So you can see here that I've got this nice beautiful purple and green, and these are my secondary colors that I'm actually using in a touch point. So this is how you figure out what colors you're going to use as your secondary colors. Is basically when you start to actually build touch points for the brand, that information then is going to be added, right, to over here. Let me zoom in here to the color palette. So now I'm going to create, and what I did was I tried to be a little bit more creative. Instead of calling this just black, I'm calling it pasta nera. White, pasta viola, which is like a purple pasta. So there's actually pasta names for colored pasta like this. So that's why I named it that. And then you can see how I pulled all the colors, right? The same thing. I'm creating a CMYK. I'm deciding on the RGB colors, the same thing. So you can do that exactly the same thing inside your Illustrator file. You start with a CMYK, you get that formula, then you save the file as RGB, and then you get your RGB colors. I recommend going that route, starting with the CMYK colors first, and then finding out what the RGB colors are second, just because as we work on printed pieces and that sort of thing, we have to have something first to start with, and then we can transition to the RGB color formulas. I'm going to update the primary brand typeface with the fonts that are using in the logo. So how do I find that out? Well, it's pretty simple. I just come in here and look at the typeface that I'm using, and what I'll need to do is open up it's different in every program, I tell you. Character or paragraph, let's see, Command T. I know how to do it that way, I just cannot remember how to do it up here. So Command T is your character palette, right? So this is telling me that I'm using Confiteria script, and I'm using semi-bold. So what I'll need to do is come into this section of it and update the content here. I can describe why I picked the font that I did. That's good. And I also am giving, again, a brand guidelines is direction. So you always want to make sure you're putting in direction into the design. And I gave it a few tips to remember when setting the type, when to use it. And you can see how I've typed out all of the typeface out so that I can see a sample of it. And then I gave a little bit of direction, preferred for logo usage only. So in other words, I don't want someone to use this typeface for something like a header. Okay. I want it to stand out, and the way that I'm allowing it to stand out is by only using it in the logo. Right now, you may not know what typefaces you want to put into your secondary. So you can just leave this alone for now, but eventually you will decide on a typeface that you're going to need based on the mock-ups that you create. So you can see here where I created the menu, right? And I started laying out the menu, and I started using a typeface here, right? And in this case, type is under type. So if I open up the character palette to my other screen, you can see I started using this typeface here, and then I've got the railway, and then I have the little description. So as I'm starting to build these mock-ups, right, for my project, I then, once I'm done with my mock-ups, I will then update this section based on whatever I created over here in my mock-ups. That pretty much wraps up this week's training. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I hope you enjoy this process of learning how to build these elements in your brand style guide. Take care.